My name is Michael Thompson from Copperleaf Financial. I'm one of the partners and senior wealth advisor here at Copperleaf. And of course, we're based in Williston, Vermont, although we have an office in Rutland too. Joining us today, and our topic today is changing the game. And we're going to be talking about clean money and sustainability. Our guests today are Joel Solomon from the Renewal Fund. Joel is a legend in the sustainable investing world and is going to walk us through some of his experiences in sustainable investing and sustainability and help us understand what that means and what we can do as individual investors and achieving some sustainability objectives. And Sam and Sarah Adams from Vert Funds, from Vert Asset Management in California. And we've been using their sustainable real estate fund in our sustainable portfolio for a while. We were early. I don't think we were the first, but we love their approach to sustainable investing in the real estate world, and it's an important part of our overall portfolio. So thank you everybody for joining us. Joel, thank you for joining us today. Sam and Sarah also. Joel, I want to start with you a little bit and talk about your book, The Clean Money Revolution here. And you really have laid out your experience through your lifetime and how you kind of took on sustainable investing and sustainability and what that means. One of the things that you mentioned in the beginning of your book is that we're on the cusp of an economic revolution. What do you mean by that, Joel? What does that mean?
More and more of us are coming to understand the connection between ourselves and our money and what our money is doing on our behalf. Where did it come from? What are the factors around how it's created? Who's affected, what is affected, what places, the planet, how the long-term future might be affected by our money. And as a young man, trying to make sense of the world in the 60s and on from there, I thought a lot about where did the money come from? How did I get it? Why do I have it? Why do others have less? Some have more. And a personal life situation in which my father's family carries a genetic kidney disease called polycystic kidney. And I was diagnosed early on. And I thought about what does the kidney do? I didn't really know a lot about it. And when I realized that its job was to clean my blood, this became a life metaphor for me that I thought, this is where the clean money concept comes from, is the planet is like, has a big kidney and has to process whatever humans do to affect it when we're digging and building and all of those kinds of things. And so it drove me to really consider, where is my money? What's its effect? And what can I do about that? And that became a guidance for my life.
Yeah, you thanks for that. And you talk about the kind of the whole idea of financial detox. And when you think about the kidney function in our bodies, it really is a cleanser or a detoxifier in a lot of ways. And you make that connection to financial detoxing too. Say more about that. How did you kind of arrive at that?
Well, it started with thinking about what the kidney does and starting to read labels at the grocery store. What am I eating? How does that affect me? Where does that food come from? What kind of chemicals might be in it? What about the workers who help to grow the food, to produce the food, the factories, the shipping, all of the entire story and history of how do I end up walking in a grocery store and getting something? And then how does that affect my body? And how has it affected other people through the entire chain of its existence? I want to add that my friend gave me her kidney about 15 years ago. So the story ended happily. unfortunately. And but I became a serious devotee of I have a responsibility for my actions and my choices, and I need to take that seriously. It's a very obtuse world to figure out the history of money and where does it come from when we place an investment. There's so many factors, but the very idea of awakening to the thought that it does matter, it makes a difference, and I have some responsibility for these choices led me to a career in what might clean money look like, and how might cleaner money make the world better and healthier.
Absolutely, and I love the connection, Joel, to food. I started off my career before wealth management in the food industry. I started an organic food distribution company in the late 70s, early 80s, and you talk in your book about discovering Stonyfield and Gary Hirschberg. We were actually one of the first distributors. We ran a little co-op, and we were one of the first ones to actually be an outlet and distribute Stonyfield yogurt in the early days. So we were buying right from Gary.
I was riding around in a car with Gary, visiting the business and going to some place possible. We were within an inch of each other. Yeah.
And seventh generation, the same thing. We were some of the first to pick up seventh generation and that. So I think we have some shared background in some of those things.
You must be an astute financial guide for people after those experiences.
Well, we hope so. I always tell people I bring sort of my holistic save the planet origins in the organic food world to wealth management and helping people align their values with their money and how they spend, how they save, and how they give. And all those things contribute to what you're talking about, which is clean money and a sustainable world. Sam and Sarah, back to the financial detox idea. You guys are doing a lot of work with financial advisors and with your fund to help people address this idea of financial detoxing and investing their money in a way that might be sustainable. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you're discovering in your journey of sort of sustainability and financial detox.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be here with you. Yeah, our company's slogan is "Money Talks, Speak Up," and it's kind of a recognition and a promotion of the idea of what Joel was just talking about, that all money has impact, right? It's using a food analogy. It's like a nutrient, like a fertilizer or water. Where it goes, things grow, and where it doesn't go, things wither. And so we want to help people on their investment side be intentional with their capital and flow their money towards things that they want to see more of and away from things that they want to see less of. And our particular history, both of Sarah's and my careers, is in the financial services industry, in institutional investment management, but in particular working with financial advisors. And so about 5 years ago, we left our respective careers, hers in impact investing and mine in institutional investment management, and launched Vert to help financial advisors do more sustainable investing. And there's 3 components to what we work on. One is we provide investment vehicles for investors to vote their capital, like the Global Sustainable Real Estate Fund that you use in your business, Michael. We also provide a lot of education to financial advisors on what it means to invest sustainably, how to do it, and how to communicate that with their stakeholders. And then we do a lot of engagement, which is Sarah's responsibility.
Yeah, so on the engagement side, we really see investing in the public markets, this platform that we have as an asset manager, to make that connection back to the company that is in our mutual fund. So while we have a publicly traded fund and we invest in publicly traded companies, through engagement, we go and speak to those companies and say, as an investor, we're investing in you because of ESG criteria. And what we see on the horizon is, investors are interested in this. They're interested in you reporting this out. We're interested in you collecting this data to begin with and talking about it in your management strategy. So while our fund has an evidence-based and kind of thought process to it, some might have previously said, oh, that's passive, so an asset manager would never talk to their company. They just make the investments. We're really trying to say, no, actually, we can be a connector and pass that message back to the companies of why we're investing in them and what we want to see from them.
You're changing that story. Thank you. I think that's really helpful. I want to get back to this whole idea of what is sustainability, because sometimes people ask me, clients and others get confused about the language. We talk about ESG and we talk about SRI and we talk about sustainability and we talk about impact. But Joel, one thing that you talked about in your book was this whole idea of thinking in terms of generations, and instead of kind of my own world and my own life and what's my money doing this week in terms of the interest it's earning, thinking in terms of 500 years, for example, and what impact am I having for the next 500 years? That's really a radical idea. Not so radical when you think about it. You know, if we were living in another era, but today I think it's hard for people to think 5 years down the road. What advice do you have for investors thinking about that mindset and thinking about things from a generational or a 500-year perspective, is, you know, the immediacy that we're all sort of caught up in today?
Well, first I'll say, obviously, it's intended as a metaphor to cause us to think. What might that mean? We know that we will all only be here for a certain amount of time, and that the actions that we do while we're living have an effect on people and places actually all over the planet. If we really track, where do the products come from? Where's our money placed? How do I influence things far, far away that I may not be able to really see unless I pay attention? And secondly, we know, most of us, I believe, know, and we come from backgrounds and maybe spiritual traditions that encourage us to be better people for the betterment of society, or for the whole, for our families, for our communities, and for those who come after us, and all the rest of ecology, the creatures, this planet, which is such a miracle that has sustained us through this time so far. It is a finite resource, and we are very effective at extracting and taking from it what meets our perceived needs. When we go to the grocery store, when we shop, when we bank, when we buy insurance, when we make most of the choices in our life, we actually affect things far, far away and far into the future. And I know that for myself, especially having benefited from modern science and ability to be healthy and alive right now through kidney failure, there are people everywhere that are challenged with all kinds of issues. And how can we want less than as many people as possible to enjoy decent lives where they can take care of their families, they can get education, they can be cared for by the societies that they live in. And even more importantly, the great reason for all of that is all the people who will come after us, be they direct bloodlines, family members, or simply the people that are connected to our daily lives through the choices we make with consumption, with investment, and with how and what our money does. I want my children to have that ethic. I want them to think about what comes after them. And I encourage, I'm getting closer to that future deathbed. I'm halfway through my 60s. it matters to me a lot to do what I can with this precious lifetime to leave things better in any way that I can. And I think that many of us actually want that, but we do need the tools and the professionals and the understanding of how to be better aligned with it.
And it's possible. I'm reminded of, for so many years, I think in this wealth management and financial planning and finance world in general, there was I don't know if it was Milton Friedman or who, this sort of idea that, the purpose of our money is to make more money, and our fiduciary obligation to our own money, and in the case of professionals like myself, to simply make money for our clients. Oh, we just lost your visual, Joel. Oh, now you're back.
Yeah, battery.
In any case, we have an obligation to make money, and what the money is doing is maybe secondary. But Sam and Sarah, I'll turn it kind of back to you guys. I think the tide may be changing on that, in terms of maybe the idea that we had to give up return in order to do good with our money. Is that still the case? I think there's this traditional idea that, if I pay attention to how my money's invested and I try to screen out certain companies or screen for certain things, or try to implement what we might think of as sustainability or impact or ESG, however we want to think of it, that we're going to give up return. Are you seeing any data? Is there any data that's true, or has the tide started to turn?
Yeah, we're seeing lots and lots of data. I'm writing a book with Larry Swedroe, who I think is your next guest on this channel.
Yeah.
And he's he's made a career out of summarizing the academic research that's done on investing. And there's literally papers coming out every week on the effects of investing sustainability in terms of financial performance. And since sustainable investing in an ESG perspective is only about 15 years old, there's lots of different outcomes. I kind of liken it to the food studies. Is a glass of red wine good for you, or is it bad for you, or how much coffee? You get all these conflicting studies. We're kind of in that space, and the way to summarize it really is that investors have a choice now, right? They can have a very narrow investment portfolio, just invested in a couple of things, and the outcomes will be more variable. They can have a broader portfolio that excludes the worst offenders and highlights the best or most sustainable companies, and have a return that's more akin to the market. It really is a choice that investors have. It's hard to sort those things out and determine in advance which ones will perform better and worse going forward. But with the right investment manager, the right financial advisor, you can make those determinations and then invest according to what makes sense for you. And I like the way you said it, Michael. If your only purpose with your money is to make more money, there's even a way to do that with sustainability. But I think a lot more people, as Joel described, have more than a single purpose with their money.
Can I just add to that, the funds are available today are many more and more varied than this conversation. Yeah. If this conversation was taking place 15 years ago, you would have had only a handful of social responsible investments, so very tilted towards one type of investor. And that has just changed the landscape. There's just more choice available to articulate your values in the marketplace.
It's true, and I think it's worth sharing, and you guys might be able to add some color to this. In the early days, in my experience, and even in the conversation I had this morning with I was down in the village of Montpelier meeting with Will, the executive director of the Vermont Community Loan Fund. We were talking about the origins of VCLF and how it really went back to the anti-apartheid days. That there were a group of investors, especially faith-based investors, a group of nuns, frankly, that wanted to invest their money in a way that was excluding South Africa and things that were supporting apartheid. And I remember those days as really the origins of sustainable investing or impact investing or socially responsible investing. And I think a lot of that, and in those days, it was easy to say, oh, I'm going to give up return. I'm willing to give up return to divest from certain bad practices or certain things that were impacting the planet or in people in ways that I didn't want to. But I've seen studies recently that have actually gone through different portfolios and excluded certain criteria and excluded things and back tested different exclusionary approaches, and resulting in very little or no change in returns over time. So anyway, I think there's enough data now that we can kind of throw out the myth that in order to invest sustainably, to have to be conscious of the next generation or Joel's kind of 500-year perspective, we needn't be concerned about giving up returns giving up monetary returns to achieve those objectives. And not that that's the only objective for how we position our money.
Michael, one of the larger real estate companies we invest in really dislikes the term ESG and sustainability, and it's kind of a pet peeve of his. And I said, well, what's your problem with it? He's like, listen, if we're taking care of the environment because we're using less inputs, less natural resources to create more outputs, and we're creating less pollution, and if we're treating our people better, and our supply chain has less risk in it, and if we have good management controls, this is E, S, and G. He says that's operational excellence. That's not sustainability or ESG. We're just running a better company, right? We're doing more with less. We're being more efficient. We're treating people better. That's a better company. We don't need to dress it up in sustainability and ESG and all these things. And it's really interesting because they are one of the more sustainable real estate companies, and yet he's a board member and he dislikes the term. And it just goes to show that there's a new way of thinking about sustainability, that rather than as a constraint, right? You can't invest in companies doing business in South Africa, or you can't invest in tobacco companies or oil and gas companies. Think it as an opportunity to both take advantage of the transition to a low carbon economy, but also minimize some risks with regards to that. And I think that's a really exciting development in this that does go back to what you were saying. It's not necessarily a compromise on performance when you're actually investing in better companies.
Yeah, I think that's true. Joel, you've done a lot of work in your book. You talk about the work that you've done with Carol Newell and kind of how that gave you a vehicle for the Renewal Fund, the current fund, and your approach to some of these investments. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and share some of that story with our participants today, so they can learn a little bit about that? We certainly want them to get access to your book, so we'll talk about that, and they can contact you to read the whole story. But share a little bit of that story with us.
So the great opportunity for me was to meet a woman who shared similar kinds of values and felt that the money that she had inherited was far more than what she needed, and also that she had not really done anything for it other than be born. And it caused her to think very deeply about what the money was doing. And so we met on that perhaps moral and ethical plane, but there was also a desire to do constructive things with money. Money's a powerful tool. It can It can make or break all kinds of issues on the planet, with people, society, and being thoughtful about how we're going to make money makes a huge difference. And it eventually we'll be able to know, science and smart people will figure out how to show us actually what the difference is, given what we buy in our lifetimes or where we invest in our lifetimes. So I've talked mostly so far today about the moral, kind of moral, ethical, maybe a spiritual view of what money is, why, what's my relationship to it. But the good news is we can make money doing better things. We have major climate issues. We have major fairness issues in society. We have health issues that are created by our economy, and on and on. But the solutions create successful businesses. And those successful businesses can make us a good return rate. So it's not about rejecting the entire frame, but it's about being more thoughtful. If we consider how do we treat our neighbors, how do we act as citizens, it's similar with our money. And there are great choices, and there's a lot of money to be made today on doing things less damagingly, more efficiently, harm people less, maybe even better, support people that we may never know directly and their lives as they try to take care of their families and their well-being. We're all connected in this. And the marketplace of trading goods and services has become very, very sophisticated, complex. It takes sometimes very smart people to track and understand how it all works. But there are opportunities for us at very available and straightforward ways to choose between worse and better, and still look out for our responsibilities, supporting our families, thinking about our long-term situations, how we're going to pay for university or whatever it is for each person. There's a really exciting period in history where solutions are creating great return rates and are needed. And we're only just beginning at rebuilding how the world is going to work economically. And I'm very optimistic about where that's going to lead us.
Yep. Well, you talk in your book about the $1 trillion question, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Before we get there, though, you raise an interesting issue for me, which really is all about alignment. And a friend of mine uses a phrase that he calls funded contentment when we're trying to achieve financial independence or financial success. When we think of it and helping clients with their planning, can we achieve funded contentment? But the only way we can do that if there's alignment, right? If there's alignment with our values and our money, again, from a spending, saving, and a giving standpoint, if those things are in alignment, then I think we can achieve funded contentment.
And if I can look at my portfolio and feel happiness about it,
yeah,
that's gold.
It is. It is. It absolutely is. It's where the magic is. But you talk about in your book this $1 trillion question. What's that all about? What do you mean by the $1 trillion question?
Well, as it turns out, simply through aging and passing, we are going to see a many trillions of dollar generational transfer of wealth on the planet over these next few decades. Wealth is accumulating as humans figure out how to go further, let's say in the most positive way, in understanding how to use what the planet and people's labor can create and how to make that a more wholesome cycle. I want to know that the choices I make about investing are choices I would make for my own family and how they get affected, the same way that my money, might affect other people's families and lives. So back to the $1 trillion question is, it's estimated that 30 to 50 trillion dollars is going to pass hands generationally just in North America alone. It's hundreds of trillions of dollars. This is money moving from one mindset and point in history. I'm mid-60s. I think a certain way. I've learned things a certain way. There's room for so much innovation, creativity, and positive use of investment capital to fuel a world that hopefully will be kinder, gentler, better balanced, and will provide a safe and fair future for everyone. It's idealistic, but we have to think positively about the future and our role in it.
In a way, Joel, it's wisdom. It's how in other generations and earlier generations, how did we pass along our wisdom? Today, these days, we can pass along our wisdom through our money, right? And through the impact that we're having in our money, and how we position that and teach that to the next generation.
We've experienced this a little bit as a company, where there was an existing relationship with a financial advisor who was run by someone in their late 60s and who has children in their 30s. And when we started our business, he said, "Oh, ESG, that's nice. Do not come to my office and sell your fund. I am not interested." But just so happens that he is interested in this lineage, passing down values through money, and his children do work in his business, and that's his succession plan, is to pass it over to them. And they're making great headway that way. But his children have said, "We are interested in this." And the owner has come back and said, "Okay, my children are interested in this. Please come to my offices and talk to us about sustainable investing."
Yeah. Sometimes wisdom gets pulled from us instead of we get pulled to it instead of transitioning it out. I want to get back to Sam and Sarah. Tell us a little bit more about your global real estate impact and investment fund, because I know real estate from a climate standpoint, real estate can have a huge impact, right? And so, how is your fund making a difference in the investments that you're making in those real estate investments? Actually making a difference? Give us some examples and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll give I'll give kind of the headline figures, and then let Sarah talk about how we're making a difference. But real buildings consume 40% of the world's energy and create 33% of the world's greenhouse gases. So it's kind of a surprise to people. We're always thinking about the transportation sector, agriculture, those types of things. So if we want to do something about climate change, we need to address the built environment, buildings. We need to do something about that. The other surprising statistic, at least at first blush, is that we spend 90% of our time indoors. At least Americans do. And so our health is really defined by the space that we occupy, right? In terms of air quality and materials and all those types of things, but also in how it fosters interaction or provides privacy, all those social issues as well. So the built environment is an extraordinarily large opportunity to make our world and our lives more sustainable. Now, the really good news is there's very profitable ways to do that. The simplest examples are, of course, you reduce the energy use in a building, you reduce the carbon footprint, you make it more efficient. And this is something that I think anytime you change a light bulb to LED, you understand that process, right? There are commercial real estate companies around the world doing that now, installing better air conditioning systems, using less water. And a lot of these projects, a lot of them are very profitable already, because when we were building these buildings in the 50s or in the 70s, we weren't really concerned about these things, and we have way better technology. So the question isn't whether this should be done. It's whether these real estate companies know that it's possible and have taken the commitments to make them. And that's where Sarah's work is so important.
Yeah, so we do have this engagement piece where we engage with all of the companies in our fund. So that's 130 plus REITs globally. It's just important for them to hear from an investor voice rather than a consultant or a policy advocate per se, because we're investing in them based on ESG criteria, and we're helping them in a sense see what's on the horizon. So for instance, task force for climate related financial disclosures, just one way that we have seen an impact within the companies that we have in our fund is we had a call with a company yesterday, in fact, who said, you reached out to us about the recommendations of the task force for financial climate related financial disclosures, a framework for a company to think about climate at the management level. And it's a common rubric that us as an investor can have with the company. And this company we spoke to yesterday said it wasn't even on our radar in 2019. You called, we talked about it, you sent us some resources. We now report this way. And in fact, my role and my sustainability team role, we now report to the CFO. It's important. And then they related to us additionally, that's important for us to have these conversations with investors because it does move the ball forward.
I think that's so important. And what you guys are doing is such a tangible way that our clients and individual investors can see the direct connection between their dollars invested in their portfolio, whether it's in their IRA or their Fidelity investment account, whatever it is, directly to your fund that's directly connected to these real estate projects that are having a demonstrable impact on the climate, on the environment. And
we're
go ahead.
We're working on a really bigger picture thing here, which is that traditionally, or at least lately, capitalism in terms of the public markets has been focused on hitting that quarterly earnings figure, right? So that the stock market likes your results and your company has a rise in share price and isn't hurt by that. But that's really short-term thinking. Now, that where that links up with sustainability and what Joel was talking about with the 500 years is that a lot of sustainable projects make a lot of sense from a profitability standpoint if you go out 5-10 years, right? So if I do a deep energy retrofit of my building, it might cost me $10 million to do that. But over the next 10 years, I'll be saving $20-30 million in terms of utilities. And so I can't justify that on a 3-month or a 1-year return on investment criteria. But if I have a long-term horizon, I can accrete lots of value to my company. Now, what's important for these companies to hear from people like Sarah, people like us, is that we're long-term investors. We want to hold you forever if you're making these types of decisions. If you're making these short-term decisions, that's not going to work for us. We want you to look further out, and we will be rewarded as investors, and you will be rewarded as a company if you make those long-term sustainable decisions.
Yep. And I think that long-term piece, long-term profitability and making money over the long term is so congruent and makes so much sense, and just ties back to Joel's whole idea of this kind of 500-year time horizon. When we're thinking about it, we can have an impact over time and have an impact today while we're making a difference long term. I want to remind our audience that please enter any questions in the chat box. Go ahead and enter questions for any of us if you'd like us to address anything that's on your mind before we wrap up in a little bit. Encourage your questions for sure. I want to focus on kind of what's coming, what's the future with you guys, because you all have had a big impact. Joel, you for many years, and Sam and Sarah, you guys for many years also. and I'm curious about the challenges for the future. And before we get to that, part of that, I think the wealth management and the financial advisor world, I think we've been a big obstacle to some of these changes. And one of the ways that we think about it, Joel, in your book, you mentioned the whole idea of a fiduciary is to help clients do the best they can with their money. And you offered the idea, which I've always thought in our role, that the long-term health of the planet is really part of being a fiduciary. It's part and parcel to helping people do the best they can with their money or earn the most, but it goes beyond that. It goes deeper than that. So before we get into kind of what you guys see as the future and the challenges ahead, I want to talk a little bit about how investors might think about interacting with their advisors or with kind of the investing community. To what kind of questions should people be asking, and how should people be thinking about the other professionals that they're working with in their life to make sure that they're getting what they're looking for, that they're having the kind of impact that they want to have with their money. Joel, what are your thoughts about that?
It can be very intimidating and daunting to walk into a financial firm and share this intimate information and seek help. They're often, we think we respect your smarts and intelligence and know that you're spending all day, every day learning about this field and mastering how you make the choices and guide us as your clients. That relationship, what's important about that relationship, and particularly these days, is that we do come with clarity about our values, what we believe in, what we care about, how we want to be represented in the world by our investments. We may not have the whole world know about it, but maybe our family will. We certainly do. And as we come to understand the relationship between it is not just a lifeless form that we put money into a thing and money comes back out. Many people's lives are affected. Places are affected. Other species are affected. Fairness and safety on the planet is affected. Many, many things. So we need to equalize that relationship in this way, which is about the values and the meaning and purpose. That's our job as the customer and the client. We have to be clear about that with our professionals. We have to ask more questions if we're having trouble understanding why we're invested in something. We need to assert ourselves about what's okay and what's not okay for me personally. And today's best investment professionals are going to be listening keenly and helping to fulfill what our deepest beliefs are, and do it through our financial selves. That's a very important and precious relationship. We give over a lot of power and authority to professionals to look after our money. It's our job to let them know what we care about and what's going to make us feel better while doing better financially. And we want to know that you are serious about going deeply and exploring these companies and raising our voice through your voice and those kinds of things. You serve a very important function in the world. So that's the most important is if we ever feel disempowered by our financial managers because of our belief systems and what we ask for, that should be a signal to ask some tougher questions and perhaps make a different choice. And these days, there are financial professionals who are very sensitive to these topics and clearly stand out from the rest, certainly for myself and my worldview. So thank you for helping reform and advance the industry that we're involved in, the larger industry, because it's very, very important. It's a very intimate role.
That's important. Thank
I
you.
want you to make my money do better.
Yep, and it's the whole. We are, again, my belief is, as fiduciaries, we have an obligation to understand, to listen, to help you align your money with your values, accomplish those things, and be mindful of the fact that we have a long-term obligation to the planet as well, and to you as an individual, as a fiduciary. Sam and Sarah, anything to add to that?
Just ask the question. I mean, as a consumer,
Yeah.
ask that question to the purchase you're about to make. What are you doing this company? Look for that section on their website. See if they're a green certified company or a B Corp, or if they're just, if there's any clothing that I need, I'm going to Patagonia. If there's any ice cream I need, I go to Ben and Jerry's, right? These, if there's any food we need, we go organic. These are just choices that we make because we want. And when we don't know, we try to remind ourselves to ask the question. And when you're talking to your to your bank, or, whatever, ask the question. When you're talking to your financial advisor, ask the question. There's another financial advisor that worked with us. We asked them if our clients if they were getting any increase from their investors for sustainable investing. It's like 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10. A couple of years later, he comes back and he's like, it's now 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10 investors that are asking for sustainability. How can you help us? So he sent 3 of his financial advisors to our sustainability investing boot camp. They've now rolled out this strategy. Over half of their clients are adopting it. And it just was a couple individuals saying, hey, Bruce, got anything that's more sustainable? Like, that's literally the only thing you have to say. And your downstream impacts are huge. So ask the question.
Yeah, ask the questions. And I could get on my soapbox and say that those advisors, there were probably 10 of those clients that those advisors didn't even ask if they cared, which is the first step, I think.
Well, there's still this thing that we're not supposed to ask, right? We're not supposed to ask, right? I'm not supposed to ask for organic milk at the coffee store. No, actually you are. You're allowed to. Please do.
Yes, you are. So let's talk about the future. And again, I'll remind people, raise your hand or ask questions if you have questions. But as we look out ahead, Joel, you've helped pioneer so much of this thinking and had an impact and touched so many aspects of sustainability and some of the changes. I'm amazed that sometime we'll have to get together for some coffee and we can share some of the people we've met over time, because I know that I'm sure that we've crossed paths a few times. But what's the future look like for you? I know you said you're very optimistic, but I guess what I'm getting at is, what are the challenges that you think what are the next bridges that we need to cross, right? What are the next challenges that we need to work hard to move forward? That's what I'm wondering. Where are the next things, the next doors that we need to knock on and open up?
Well, I'm going to assume that people on this call will be fairly informed about what I'm going to say to that. But it has to do with ecological crisis. It has to do with justice crisis. It has to do with how will this be a safe place for future generations? And will we pay closer and better attention to how today's activities affect the long-term future? The information is now available. Plenty of information is available. It's the time to act on that info. And the choices I make today and that we make today are going to affect future generations dramatically. We know there's climate crisis. We know that we have all kinds of unfairness through our systems. We have harm that happens every day, and it happens through human choices, a lot of it. Future generations will be studying this period of history.
Okay.
They see and know that we had enough information. All the signals are here. It's a choice that we make. And that choice is getting easier because there are more professionals, there are more products, there's more awareness, there's more information, and we have an increasingly smarter, this has probably gone on for many eons, next generations who have new tools, who have new insights, and are going to be relentless about insisting that we make smart choices. They might want to have children and family. They might want to enjoy some of what we've been able to enjoy. We're at risk of squandering some precious parts of the future. And I believe that's the wake-up call. We can't wait longer to take action with whatever we can influence, that it is infused with what we believe in, what we care about, and with what we don't want to be involved in. And it's our responsibility to articulate, speak up about that, ask questions. If we're struggling with it, there are many resources today to find the financial managers who actually care, the products that actually matter. And there are many, many ways now to make dramatic contributions to what we care about in that future. And hopefully we will be looked back on kindly, that we did wake up and choose to be conscious at this point in history when so much is at stake. So let's do a good job for those people that will study us later.
I agree. And one of the things that I worry about, and I'm going to ask Sam and Sarah to answer the same question, but it makes me think, one of the things I worry about is this whole idea of greenwashing and sort of things getting in the way of people actually have an impact the way that they want to have an impact. They think they're doing good and they may not be. Anyway, I wonder about that, but I agree with you. So Sam and Sarah, your turn to kind of answer the question about the future. What are the doors that need to be opened? What are the bridges that we need to cross, and what's that look like for you guys?
Big question. From where we sit, I would say there does need to be that carrot and the stick, and the market has a lot of inputs, and now it's time for some regulation to catch up. And then maybe the market will, push the ball forward further, and then the regulations will have to catch up again. But to kind of combat that greenwashing that is taking place in the market, there does need to be some regulation, and there is regulation starting to be adopted in the EU, and that's trickling over into how the SEC is asking investment managers and financial professionals about what they invest in as it relates to ESG. So the future holds for me and us at Vert Asset Management is a more broader take up of ESG, helped by clear regulation and clear definitions, so that clients, financial advisors, all market participants can be speaking the same language and work towards these goals and these outcomes of more fairness and acknowledging climate risk as investment risk.
Yeah, and along those lines, I'll add, for me, one of the challenges for our clients and in our practice is really the ability to report impact. It's challenging to say to a client, I don't have enough data to say, here's the tangible impact that your portfolio is having. I can count some funds are starting to give us data in terms of CO2, in terms of carbon emissions and those kinds of things. You guys are providing some data along those lines with your fund too. But there is a lack of tangible impact data that we can actually share in terms of kind of what the results of some of these investment portfolios are. Anyway, Sam, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm just really excited about the future. I think that a big part of this challenge is the information. And Joel said, reading the label of the ingredients in the food was a key kind of part of the understanding. What's really exciting about sustainability data is that it's now really coming to the fore, is really prevalent. It's a bit unstandardized, but as Sarah said, with a bit of regulation, we'll soon have the information on ESG and companies that will be flowing through both the decision to invest, but then the outcomes of those decisions on how sustainable portfolios, what the impact is, Michael. And when that happens, okay, one of the most powerful forces on the planet, capitalism, okay, will start turning like a big ship towards making more decisions for good and away from bad. If we have a price for pollution and a price for clean air and price for human health, we start getting those things. Capitalism will start doing some of that heavy lifting of moving us around. Right now, it's ignoring too much of that information. And once it starts paying attention, it will become a force that will help us take care of some of those ecological, some of those fairness, and some of those justice issues that Joel was talking about.
Good, thank you. Well, we're getting near our time, and I think we need to wrap up. Joel, I want to give people an opportunity if they want to get a copy of your book, or digital or hard copy. I'm sure it's available at all local booksellers and others. But is there an address where they can get in touch with you, where they could find out more, or maybe get a digital copy or something? Tell us how people can learn more.
I have a website about the book, which is joelsolomon.org. There, you should be able to find it in other places, but I encourage you to reach out to me if that's desirable to you. And Joel at renewalfunds.com. That's our impact investing venture fund, which I won't I won't go into right now. Just say that's an important part of my work in this field. But I'm happy to share these books. They tell a lot of stories of the origins of. It tells a lot of stories of the origins of this so-called impact investing, and personal journey to get there, and stories of people that are entrepreneurs or practitioners in these fields that are inspiring and maybe shed some new insights for you into what's going on and just how extensive this work is now.
Yeah. It is a fabulous book. I encourage everybody to read it, and we're gonna get a few copies in our office too.
Great.
Thank you, Sam and Sarah, for joining us today, and for all the great work that you guys are doing, and for the fund that you make available for us, so that we can have a sustainable real estate alternative within our portfolios. Thank you, Joel, for all the hard work that you do and continue to do, and for joining us today. I know you have a busy schedule, and it's of the grace and goodness of your heart that you give your time to us. So thank you very much for doing that. And thank you, guests, for joining us today. Next month, as Sam said, my guest is going to be Larry Swedrow, and we're going to be talking about inflation. So that's going to be happening in July, and we have a few other good guests I'm excited about later in the year. Bill McKibben is going to be joining us from 360.org, and talking about some of the work that he's doing here in Vermont too. So thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.